Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Chapter 27, The Bargain, with the sunburst symbol?
The Rising Sun of Kyrian.
The Rising Sun. Okay, I didn't actually think about that, and it's like, it's not wavy, so it's not the white cloaks. The white cloaks are wavy. Yeah, this is the spiky one. It's just like a crown.
Right. This is definitely the Kyrian. This is a symbol of Kyrian. So we're in Kyrian, the spiky one. Yep. And it's rising because, oh yeah, it does kind of look like a crown.
The Hill of the Golden Dawn. It's all very East-oriented iconography.
He who comes with the dawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
There's a couple of bargains actually in this chapter, right? There's the bargain with Cadsuane and the bargain with the Seafolk.
I feel like there's even a lot of internal bargaining with Min. There's a lot of bargain stuff happening, which is appropriate given that the Seafolk are a central part of the chapter, even though they aren't there. It makes sense that bargaining would be a recurring theme just because they're near the plot at all.
Well, do you mind if I read us in?
You want to take the Min read in, really? You try to take my Min read in?
See, I think of this as a Rand chapter, even though we start from Min's POV.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can have the read out.
Okay, I'll take the read out. You take the read in.
Okay. And before we get started...
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
I mean, that is how the Aiel are doing their thing.
Exactly. That's how they decide who gets to beat his ass. Yep.
But before we get started on the chapter proper, I do want to reiterate to everyone that if you would like an ad-free version of the episodes, you can come over to our Patreon for $5 a month and get the episodes uploaded there without ads. That's a thing that is happening. So just a little reminder before we get into the chapter.
And if you notice the last two episodes came out a little funky, it's because we were figuring out how to do that. And there was some technical problems around getting that process up and running. But we figured it out, or at least we think we have. So, yes, going forward, there will be an ad-free version on Patreon for those of you who really, really, really can't stand to listen to ads. And for those of you who are supporting us already, go over there and listen. Like, there's no reason to fill your ears with ads.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve, but I'm getting there. And I'm documenting my learning in public for the whole internet to never forget. It's great.
Every time we try and make a change or do something new, there's always going to be a learning curve. And this whole Spreaker ad thing has definitely been a steep one.
Yeah, but it's fun. And with that said, I think we should get into this chapter, but I need to day drink a little more first.
I'm day drinking caffeine.
And I actually had kind of a long read picked out. I'm getting more and more into these reads. I don't know. It's fun.
It's all right. That's what happened to Patrick is he started doing like short reads. And by the time he was done, he was reading like 6 pages at once.
Well, I was thinking more like 2.5 pages, but
fair. But it's very tempting because the reads get so fun.
I mean, it's almost like RJ's a good writer or something. Almost.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I don't really like his books that much. I think I'm iffy on whether or not I enjoy his writing. I think I really could mostly read something else. Yeah. No. No, I'm actually ready to go back and start a re-listen through from the beginning.
Ooh.
Well, because I told you I've been going through Lycanus trilogy, and I've now listened to the trilogy 3 times. Mm-hmm. And I'm coming up on the end of the 3rd time, and I'm really realizing that I've sort of hit my limit on Lycanus trilogy. But at the same time, I'm avoiding podcasts just because the news is so depressing lately. I'm really not into it. I don't know. I've sort of hit my limit on podcasts right now. I'll come back to them, but right now it's not where I am. So I'm like, well, let's see. Where am I? I haven't actually listened to The Wheel of Time in a minute. It'll be interesting to go back and do Eye of the World and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's exciting. You can live tweet your thoughts just like literally everyone else.
First time reader, very confused by end of Eye of the World. Can someone explain to me what's going on?
Do some epic level trolling.
Who's this green man guy and why is he important?
Chapter 27, The Bargain. And our symbol is the Rising Sun of Kyrian. Seated cross-legged in a heavily gilded, high-backed chair, Min tried to lose herself in the leather-bound copy of Herod Fell's Reason and Unreason, lying open on her knees. It was not easy. Oh, the book itself was mesmerizing. Master Fell's writings always swept her into worlds of thought she had not dreamed of while working in stables. She very much regretted the sweet old man's death. She hoped to find a clue in his books to why he had been killed. Her dark ringlets swung as she shook her head and tried to apply herself. The book was fascinating, but the room was oppressive. Rand's small throne room in the Sun Palace was thick with gilt, from the wide cornices to the tall mirrors on the walls replacing those Rand had smashed, from the 2 rows of chairs like the one she sat in to the dais at the head of the rows and the dragon throne atop the dais. That was a monstrosity, in the style of Tyr as imagined by Kyrian and craftsmen, resting on the backs of a pair of dragons with 2 more dragons for the arms and others climbing the back, all with large sunstones for eyes, the whole glittering with gilt and red enamel. A huge golden, wavy-rayed rising sun set in the polished stone floor only added to the sense of heaviness. At least the fires blazing in 2 great fireplaces, tall enough for her to walk into, gave a pleasing warmth, especially with snow spilling down outside. And these were Rand's rooms. The comfort of that alone outweighed any amount of oppression. An irritating thought. This was Rand's room if he ever deigned to return. A very irritating thought. Being in love with a man seemed to consist largely of a great many irritating admissions to yourself. Shifting in a vain attempt to make the hard chair comfortable, she tried to read, but her eyes kept swinging to the tall doors, each climbed by its own line of gilded rising suns. She hoped to see Rand walk in. She feared to see Soralia or Cadsuane. Unconsciously, she adjusted her pale blue coat, fingering the tiny snowflowers embroidered on the lapels, more twined around the sleeves, and the legs of breeches made as snug as she could manage to wriggle herself into. Not that great a change from what she had always worn. Not really. So far she had avoided dresses, however much embroidery she wore, but she very much feared that Soralia meant to stuff her into a dress if the Wise One had to peel her out of what she was wearing with her own hands.
Yeah, so do you want to go backwards through that?
Sure, I have all kinds of things notated throughout that read, because Min is, in case anyone has forgotten, my favorite character of the entire cast. So getting to be in her head and see what she's doing is a rare peek into why I think she's the coolest character in the whole cast.
Well, and she's creating modern clothing, right? Like heeled boots, pants.
Lady
right? Yeah, like that. That's one of the things that I always picked up is for the first time, women in Kyrian are wearing not dresses, but pantsuits, you know?
Absolutely.
I like the legs of the breeches made as snug as she could manage to wriggle herself into. I've definitely seen my girlfriend get into jeans that fit that description.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
mm-hmm. There is a certain shimmy to getting into tight pants. It's a thing. Yeah. And they don't have nearly the elasticity of fabric in Wheel of Time world as we do with like spandex and stuff. Yeah. They've got linen and probably hemp and silk. And I mean, you can cut on a bias. You can have things be diagonal and stretchy, but it's, spandex does wonders. Nylon does wonders.
Right. I guess they're not using a lot of algode, aka cotton, in Randland. That's more over in the Waste.
Yeah, they don't really make it for export, do they? They use it for themselves, but it's not like a trade good coming out of the Waste.
Although I think Egwene comments on how it should be.
For sure, because it's soft and wonderful, yes. Going backwards through this, just her frustration with fashion. That's one of the things I like about her is her frustration with fashion, which, as you said, leads to her changing the fashion. She dresses the way she wants to be seen, and that changes the world around her. It's great. And then going back from that, it's this Soralia thing. The way that Cadsuane and Soralia are both after her, and she really does not like Soralia at this point. Like, at all. Like, Soralia is very much a real antagonist to her. I feel like later, Soralia is subsumed into all the good guys and is not particularly antagonistic, but at this point she's very antagonistic towards Min.
I think it's just because they want something from her and she doesn't want to give it up. She's like, no, I'm loyal to Rand. I'm not here to spy on him or betray him. And Cadsuane and Soralia are there to pester her about details. and like figure out where is he, what's he doing, what's his plan. And she's like, I have no intention of telling you any of that.
Mm-hmm. Later on, she trusts them more because Rand is more difficult to live with.
Yeah. Well, and they've come to that. Those two have came to that bargain of they're going to make him see. Have they come to that bargain yet?
Not yet, no.
Not yet, okay.
Which I think is probably part of it. I think Min follows Cadsuane's lead on Sorilea, and Sorilea follows Cadsuane's lead on Min, I think. You know, there's easier ways to get her to cooperate than assaulting her, which is what Sorilea is reported to have done in this chapter.
One of my favorite descriptions is of the throne. It was the monstrosity in the style of Tyr as imagined by Kyrian craftsmanship. Because Kyrian, very simple, straight lines, right angles. They would give you a wooden chair with 4 legs, a flat bottom, and a flat back, right? That's normally what they would build. Mm-hmm. But Tyr is much more gaudy. But then Kyrian imitating Tyr is even gaudier because they have this stereotype of the Tyrians being gaudy. And so they're like, we're going to make a Tyr throne and it's going to be as gaudy as we can possibly imagine. And so that's one of the reasons why the throne is such a ridiculous monstrosity, is because not even the Tyrants would build it in that crazy of a way, but people who stereotype them would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And it fits so much with how Rand's personification in the minds of these various nations is so much larger than life. He is just this farm boy named Randall Thor doing his best, and they're seeing this Aes Sedai puppet or this madman or this emperor or whatever. And there's this disconnect between how people are seeing and stereotyping the dragon and how the dragon actually exists.
Right.
Yeah. And the really important, uber critical part of this read-in is the fact that Min is swept away and fascinated by Herod Fell's books.
Reason and Unreason, which I love that as a title for a book.
She's reading some hardcore philosophy. There's like math and geometry. There's Escher drawings. There's descriptions of n-dimensional spaces. There's all kinds of wild stuff happening, and she just falls into it naturally without any kind of formal education to build up to it. She just picks it up and gets it and goes there and is determined to figure out what Herod Fell himself was figuring out through writing these books, right? This isn't just Herod Fell's library. These are his notebooks. So this is his working through a problem. And she's like, I'm going to solve the problem you were working on by reading your books. That intellectual ballsiness is just like, my heart is aflutter.
Well, and she says she's there to find a clue as to why he's been killed, right? And that goes back to my theory that he was killed because they thought he was Asmodean, which has nothing to do with his writings. So that's my headcanon, is the books actually have nothing to do with why he was killed. Nobody had any clue what he was working on. They just knew he was someone who was hanging out with Rand and having long conversations with him. I believe it was Samael was in control of the golem at the time because he found. And so he was the one who wasn't sure if Asmodean was dead and would have sent the golem after Herod Fell as a potential Asmodean disguise.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because there's nothing to find, Min doesn't ever follow that trail. She ends up learning so much other stuff in her effort to find this thing that doesn't exist. She ends up finding very important things that allow her to keep up with Aes Sedai, who are bending all of their academic might on understanding things like how Callandor works and how the last battle is going to function. And by studying Herod Fell's stuff, she ends up sideways sliding into the same amount of comprehension as like 100-year-old, centuries-old Aes Sedai. And I love that about her.
Well, she's also not blinded by their prejudices and their preconceptions, right? She has what's actually happening as a baseline. You know, the most important thing she discovers is that you have to break the seals in order to reseal the Dark One. Like, you have to clear the rubble, right? Because that's the clue from Herod Fell's bookmark.
Yeah, and she finds a bunch of supporting evidence for that and a bunch of supporting reasons why you have to listen to that supporting evidence. Like, she does all of that based on curiosity and natural inclination, and is just like, of course she's in the background for a lot of scenes. What she's doing is reading. her job is to read 12 hours a day and be absolutely hyper-focused on what is in front of her.
Can't imagine why you identify with that. No idea.
So I understand wanting to see more of her in the series and wanting her to do more cool shit, but also what she's doing is hyper-focusing on getting a philosophy degree in like 3 weeks. So I think that's sexy as hell and super like aspiring. Like I can't relate to it because I'm not actually that cool, but I can aspire to relating to it.
Sanderson gives her a little more knife skills. The whole like throwing the knife at the spy in the Shan. But I think that a lot of her like knife stuff is pretty showy, right? Because like we see here, the the Aiel have no problem taking the knife absolutely away from her in a heartbeat when she whips it out, right? She's not that.
Well, it's a group of Aiel. I mean, even Tom would have a hard time with that.
Okay, maybe.
I like the fact that she absolutely goes for her knives in the face of the Aiel. She absolutely gets, like, they have to stop her. She doesn't stop herself. They have to stop her.
Yes. She's there to protect Rand.
Yeah. It's just that it's Aiel, so that wasn't going to go well. But I agree. There's things I would change about her knife skills, but
I like that she's accepted as a wise one. That like her skills and her seeing, because the wise ones, it's not a channeling group. It's a group of skilled people, of which one of those skills is channeling. One is dream walking. I think there might be others. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head.
Yeah, for sure. There's probably like certain kinds of crafters or roof mistresses or childcare providers that end up being given that same kind of authority and respect. And yeah, again, another thing where Min, by being herself, is qualified to participate in these discussions of power and importance and to have her opinion be given weight, even though she has not done any of the legwork for normal people to be qualified to be in that council. In this case, wise ones.
I don't know. She does a lot of legwork with those pants.
That's true. For sure.
I did notice that one of the reasons that she sees Sorelia as a enemy is, she got spanked, basically.
Switched. Thrown over a chair and beaten with a stick. Twice. For refusing to spill all the beans on her lover. It's, her loyalty to Rand seems pretty solid here. I feel like she's pretty committed for all that she's bitching about irritating admissions to yourself and all that. She's also like taking corporal punishment rather than snitching. So,
but in the list of spankings, I feel like this is one that we always forget when we're like, Jordan has a spanking kink, right? Like we remember Egwene's, we remember when Nynaeve gets spanked. This one, I always forget that, the Aiel get a hold of Min and just go at it.
Yeah, they kind of take liberties with her, I think, because they treat her as an attachment to Rand and they feel entitled to beat up on Rand now and then. So they're like, you're going to be this close in on the orbit. We're going to treat you like you are part of the dragon or like you're part of the Caracarn.
Well, I would almost say it's because they consider a wise one. And they're like, well, if you're a wise one, why aren't you talking about wise one's business, which includes Rand al'Thor?
Yeah, that's an element too. They absolutely would beat each other, much like Aes Sedai will set them each other pendants in various contexts. Yeah, for sure. They're giving her respect and prestige, so they are going to exact the same currency of shame and punishment to whatever degree they can, to whatever degree she'll accept. It's also, I think, not notable because she doesn't have to take her clothes off. Sorelia just like hurls her over the nearest chair and beats her. Like there's not this whole ritualized. And then she took her clothes off and breasted boobily down the stairs. We don't have that part. So I think that also helps it not stand out as being one of the like weirder spankings. It's one of the it's not less of a spanking and more of just like, God damn, the Aiel are violent.
I mean, yeah, we don't know that they let her keep her pants on, but I'm assuming because they use a stick. Rather than a hairbrush or a hand or one of the other many things people get spanked with.
Yeah.
The power.
I could do with less corporal punishment and more creative and varied forms of punishment. There's so many interesting ways. And we've got the whole Figs and Mice chapter to prove the damn point. And do we use that? No, it's Chekhov's mind manipulation. The next thing I have is talking about why Cadsuane is pissing her off. Because Cadsuane is a different proposition altogether to what Sorelia provokes her with. And it's just the fact that Min knows she has to bring Rand and Cadsuane together. And she's very, very anxious about that, which has nothing to do with Cerelia. So again, like those two are not aligned in any way, shape, or form yet.
I do notice that she says she doesn't seem to care if 2 figs for Rand or Min, either one, which is not accurate. She cares a great deal about Rand and therefore Min. She's just very good at hiding it.
Yeah, for sure. She's playing some Deus de Mar on them both, for sure. And then, yes, Rand strolls in like everything's fine. Hi, honey, I'm home.
I captured a crown while I was gone. What did you do? Because this is the first time she's seen him really since he went out and captured Ilion. That must be the crown of the swords everyone was talking about. Like literally the first time she sees him with the crown.
Yeah, he didn't pop home to update her on anything before he went off to war on Altara. That entire thing happened after he gets the crown of swords, which she literally hasn't seen it. She is the first lady of the Ta'veren, Lady Ta'veren herself, and she hasn't even seen the damn crown yet of the first war that he fought since she last saw him.
Well, I mean, at least he sent her some letters to let her know what was going on.
Fucking brusque text messages with all the wrong punctuation etiquette.
Trust no one. Like I said, trust nobody. It's okay. Great. What are you? This is season 1 of X-Files? Come on. And as a sign of his madness, he walks in, tugging his earlobe and humming, which is a Lewis Theron trait, LTT trait. He sort of is doing a lot of that unconsciously as the two of them kind of are merging together. Or in a lot of ways, Rand is becoming, this is the whole thing where like Rand is LTT, always was, right? So like that's an LTT trait. And it's like, well, was it or was it yours? Because that's who you are.
Reincarnation's messy.
It really is. It really is.
And I love how Min berates him, like very calmly saying, well, maybe the Maidens are upset because maybe they were worried about you. And it's all, she's speaking for herself, but on behalf of the Maidens. And it's a very good scolding. It's one of the better scoldings in Wheel of Time, I think. A lot of the scoldings are very abrasive and difficult. This one is just top shelf. This is how you scold.
He staggers after the scolding, but that is because he sees the one power, right? Because we see him channeling right after that. So he walks in, he staggered as if she had slapped him. No, as if she had kicked him in the belly and blinked. And then right after that, something took her gently beneath the elbows and lifted her out of the chair. That's the one power. So he walks in, seizes the one power, and that's when he gets that double vision, the crossing of the streams issue, and he stumbles because he's seizing the power. And then later, from his POV, he wants her to leave so he can seize the power because he doesn't want her to see him stumble again. Oh,
he does say again at that point?
Yeah, he does say again.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about why he was stumbling there. I missed the again. All right, that explains that. Yeah, being in her head in this part, the whole give a man sympathy at the wrong moment and you never regain the ground lost. She's so prickly on the outside and soft on the inside. It's just like, she is, for all that she's older than Rand, she's still being very young in so many ways.
It's her first time in love. She's had other relationships, but this is the first time she's ever been smitten, really fallen for somebody.
Yeah.
Which, she knew was going to happen, and she was very upset about that. But now she's just in love, and it's like, well, okay, I'm in love with him, and that's... Even though it was prophesized that I'd fall in love, that's one of those things where I'm like, just because you're prophesized to fall in love doesn't mean you don't actually fall in love with somebody, right? Like, the emotion's still real.
Yeah, having the sight sucks in the sense that you know what's coming, but it doesn't mean that's what coming is not real. Like, you aren't being railroaded into your existence. You just happen to know what's going to happen.
And honestly, so I hate to bring this back to the Lycanus trilogy, which I've been reading, and I've shouted out a few times, but that's kind of the whole point of the series, because there's there's time traveling and there's not even prophecies. They have visions of the future in like you're there. They see the whole scene and they know it's coming and there's nothing they can do to change that. But the whole point is you still make your choices that lead to that outcome, right? Like nobody's controlling you to make those choices. You still have free will to make those choices. It's just we know what's going to happen because we can predict that well what your choices will lead to, and it's an interesting push and pull of like, if we know this thing's going to happen, if we know you're going to make these choices, are they yours to make?
Yeah. It's a brain bender.
It is. It's definitely one of those things of like, if there's only one path, are you actually making choices? And it's like, yes, it's just we know that has to be the choice you're going to make. And I feel that same way where Min has these prophecies that this thing is going to happen, right? No matter what, right? Like, these people will get married. This person will get pregnant. You know, Dobrain will become king, right? Or whatever. But does that mean he has no free will? Right.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's what is time? What even is time?
Well, and I think it's one of the reasons why we can't have prophecies in the real world, right? Like,
yeah,
this is one of the things that makes us fantasy, right? Like, we can question, and I think about that a little bit in terms of like, are we just living machines reacting to stimuli, or do we actually make choices, right? Or is there a distinction between the two of those?
It's such a... Everyone should get lost in these questions at some point, because it's good for you to be humbled by the sheer impossibility of answering these questions.
As Satanist brings up, the head of our white Aja, free will versus determinism. Very white philosophy thing to think about, right? Logically.
Yeah.
It's something that, like, is a philosophical question that we are constantly examining.
Yeah, it's people have been bothered by this idea for thousands of years. Like, we have really put our best and brightest on this for millennia, and we still don't know.
Because you really can't without time travel and being able to change things, right? There's no A/B testing you can do.
No.
The closest thing we can get is with twins, maybe, right? Who are raised exactly the same. And, like, if you're genetically the same and raised the same, do you make the same choices? Yeah,
which is not... I mean, we have lots of twins with whom we can empirically say, no, they're not going to necessarily make the same choices.
At the same time, so many times these twins are separated at birth, and they, like, wear the same kind of hairstyle and wear the same kind of clothes. And, you know, it's like, oh, they've made very similar decisions in their life because they are very similar kinds of people.
Mm-hmm. And then you have, like, the Kelly twins that, you know, both chose to go into being astronauts because they just both wanted to do that, and they both passed all the and so now they are part of, you know, one of the coolest NASA studies ever, because how many times do you get identical twins that both want to be astronauts and, like, both have astronaut careers? It's
right.
It's science that will never end, you know, like, their entire lives are part of the science experiment now of just what happens when you spend a year in space versus not. You can do that with these two twins, one who spent a year in space while the other did not. And they did all the sciences and stuffs the whole time. I watched a cool documentary about it. I'm really enamored with that.
Now, here's a question. Would you rather be the twin that goes up into space or the twin that stays down on the ground?
Well, they both got time in space, like, over the course of their careers. The year in space was a very specific experiment because no one had stayed in space for a consecutive year yet. And so they did it with this guy who had a twin.
Haven't there been a bunch of cosmonauts who have done that at this point?
There's a lot of people who have accumulated over a year in space, but a year straight in space.
Okay.
I believe he's no longer the first person to have done it, but I believe at the time he was the first person to have done it.
Well, then he's always the first person to have done it.
That is how words work.
Yes, yeah, but he's no longer the only person to have done it.
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
I gotcha. Well, I'd like to do a fairly long read. I'd like to read all of Rand's letters to Min. This might take me a little while. I have claimed the crown of Ilion. Trust no one until I return. Rand. I will return when I finish here. Trust no one. Rand. Done. That's it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I drifted off over the course of that really long and tortuous read. It was really pedantic. Lots of detail.
Lots of detail. No. I love that the most important thing is trust no one in both of those.
Yeah, trust no one.
Rand's not paranoid. He's fine. He's fine. He's fine.
He's fine. He's fine. It's only the madman in his head who has a little bit of a problem. No.
Trust no one.
But then he does a very romantic way of trying to diffuse her anger. It's honestly really cute. She's bitching him out and he's kissing her and she's attempting to keep angry, but it's not working because apparently he's become a good kisser at this point.
I mean, he's been kissing multiple women. You would think Also, there's a certain amount of emotion.
Yeah, for sure.
In there that, like, she's missed him. Like, it doesn't matter how good of a kisser you are if you're like, okay, he's back and I, haven't kissed this person in a long time and I've been missing their touch.
Yeah. It's like, I haven't smelled you in weeks. Yeah, for sure. And then as that's going on, Adley comes up, who is dead, and being reminded of that and having to give that news puts a bit of a kibosh on the mood for the moment.
And he died from Rand. When Rand was attacking the Shan-Chan, the lightning went crazy and killed him because he was behind Rand and supposedly safe, but that's when the lightning went crazy.
Adley was killed by friendly fire. And Min's thought is, well, he sounds very depressed. We should fuck that out of him.
Not a bad strategy.
I subscribe to it. Lots of people in the real world subscribe to it. It is not the worst strategy in the world if we're trying to keep this man together. Like, doesn't end up happening over the course of the chapter, but she thinks it several times.
Listen, dopamine is a thing. Like, when your brain is in a bad place, sometimes that shot of dopamine can break you out of it. Not always.
Yeah, it's an actual biohack. You get into your brain and you shove it full of happy hormones through, extremely just physical hacking. You should get right around your psyche. Like, no, this is a nervous system response. You can't stop this.
I saw an interesting thing where someone said, if your child is having a meltdown, an emotional meltdown, one of the ways to short circuit it is to ask them a very logical question like, where's your nose? And like that, they can't operate both the emotional part of their brain and think of an answer to that at the same time. And so, you ask them a few very like simple questions that you can get them to answer, right? That's the trick. But like, then all of a sudden their logical brain starts functioning and their emotional brain will shut down a little bit and they won't have that entire meltdown anymore. Now, I haven't experimented on this because I don't have a child to experiment on. But I'd be curious about feedback on that if anyone thinks that's legitimate who actually has a child.
It makes a lot of sense if you consider like the grounding techniques that you get told for people with anxiety, like smell 5 things, touch 4 things, like that kind of, that sounds like a very small step away from that. Like if you force yourself to tabulate what you're experiencing, like your emotions are gonna get a little bit short-circuited and you get a little bit back from that edge.
That's why I always enjoy doing math when I'm having emotional problems. I used to pull out like a tough integral and work on it for a while, and that would help short circuit my like anxiety brain.
Yeah. So, people out there who have meltdowns either in themselves or their dependents, try some logical grounding techniques and see if that doesn't help bring the hyperventilating down a little sooner.
And yes, please be careful when you're experimenting on your children, but I assume asking them a logical question is a pretty safe. Don't induce a meltdown so that you can then test the logical thing.
No, don't do that. No. that would be unfair.
Be like, all right, I'm going to take away all of your toys just so I can test this.
Yeah, no, that's not encouraging that.
I do feel like that is a bit of a fantasy trope, though, or a fiction trope of the scientist experimenting on their children, right? Like, in whatever field they happen to be in.
That's a very common thing. The child of an inventor, or like everything through fantastical weird shit through like actual real life stories of it actually happening. Yeah.
No, someone's saying Margot is saying you can do that with your dog as well. If they're having some anxiety about like noises or stuff, you get them to like, I do that with Timber if we're out in public and he's like sort of getting barky or, sort of reacting to the other dogs around. I'll pull out the treats and say, okay, sit, lay down, shake. So if I can get him focused on me and doing the tricks, he'll ignore what's going around. And it's not just the treat, because the treat he'll just snap up and ignore. It's doing the trick.
Right. Yeah. It's doing the trick and getting your approval. And yeah. So, it's clearly this is a common hack that works for social animals. Your mileage may vary, but it should be easy to find an opportunity to try it in your life organically.
Dobrain sticks his foot in his mouth.
Yeah.
A little bit. Sort of comments on Min's coat not covering her ass unintentionally. And she sort of thinks about how, I think it was probably an actual slip. He wouldn't even intentionally make that kind of joke.
Yeah, which I completely agree with her on that. Like that was literally him just getting his mouth ran a little ahead of his brain. That's all. But yeah, it's funny. They're like about to make out and go in, and then Dobrain knocks on the door and like comes in, and the very first thing he does is make an awkward joke about her ass. It's just like, it's awkward. It's an awkward series of moments.
And I feel like when you have this person, this public figure in public, with people constantly coming and going, it's hard for him to have any intimate moments without somebody
absolutely
intruding on them, you know.
And then Rand says, "Hey, Dobrain, we should talk about all the things we've been corresponding about." And Min very angrily catwalk stalks to go get some wine and be angry about it. And there's a lot of physical comedy with her banging pitchers and goblets about. She listened carefully. What had they been up to behind her back with their dozens of letters?
Dozens! There are dozens of them!
Yeah, she gets so spun up and petty, and yet also is very interested in the news. And it's just so funny.
Well, I mean, it has a lot to do with the fact that Rand wrote those ridiculous letters to her. And like, who knows? And I'm sure was writing out campaign strategies. And I feel like it's similar when, I'm at work and I'm like, oh, I'm working. And I get a text from Never. And she's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, love you. Bye. Gotta go. I'm working. But at the same time, like, that's what I'm doing. I don't know. It's one of those things that it's hard to maintain that balance of texting when you're busy.
Yeah, for sure. And he was writing Dobrain like political instructions and campaign instructions and reports on strategy. What's he going to write to Min? I'm depressed as hell and this war is never going to end. Like, what is there to say to her? I'm sure that was like he had nothing nice to say, so he just didn't say anything, right? He just wanted to keep her safe. Whereas Dobrain, he needs to use and manipulate. So Min is creating a bit of a false equivalency here because her strategic value is being comfort for him.
Information we get from Dobrain, Torum Rioton appears to have vanished. Rumors also say that David Hanlon and Gerald Mordeth, aka Padden Fane, as you call the man, have deserted him. Not entirely accurate, right? Because Torum Rioton has become a Padden Fane conscript or whatever you want to call it, but Torum Rioton has been basically mind-fucked by Padden Fane.
Yes.
Right? And the next time we see him, he is a thrall. I think that's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
He's become a Fane thrall. And Fane takes him to Farmatting, where we see Torum Rioton attack Rand. And I believe is killed by Lan.
Yes, I believe so. It's that whole series of events, anyway.
And David Hanlon, he's only been mentioned once at this point. We saw him very briefly, but he ends up becoming a big part of Elaine's story arc as her, and he ends up killing Brigida, and then he gets shot in the back, like he's her head of arms, like that whole storyline.
Yeah, I believe he gets introduced properly next chapter. I was glancing ahead, and I'm pretty sure we get his introduction to her arc, the preamble for that next chapter. But yeah, so basically what Dobrain is reporting here is how the news of the fallout of that event where Rand got his second slash happened. Like, Torum Rioton vanished. Yeah, we saw him running away in the fog. Padden Fane vanished. We know because he made the fog. David Hanlon vanished because he's a cockroach who slipped away to go show up in Andor and do Dark Friend things there because he's a survivor. That's who he is.
Him and Millie Skane hanging out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Bors.
Yeah, for a little bit.
For a little bit, yeah. Well, he's there when Bors gets drowned by wine.
Brandy.
Is it? Oh, it is brandy. Yes.
I think poor Jacob has had enough brandy.
I mean, brandy's just distilled wine. It was wine at one point.
True. Yeah, and then he says that he's got Ailil settled into apartments. Those are the apartments that she will end up having an affair with a Seafolk wave mistress in. That's kind of the holding pattern Ailil will be in until Rand shoves her and I forget her name, the Seafolk lady, under a bed during his escape after the attack on the Sun Palace.
And then Cadsuane will use that against them to keep them under her thumb.
Yes.
Yeah. And she was hanging out with Aniella in all the previous chapters during the war, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's who Dobrain mentions next, is that Aniella is also in an apartment with secure servants, as well as Wyramon. Wyramon is not like locked up, but all of his servants are loyal to Dobrain. So we're kind of just getting a catch up on like, here's how the nobles who survived have been stabled for the time being for the rest of the book.
And remember, Wyramon and Aniella are dark friends.
Right. Ailil is not.
Ailil is not. And she becomes a relatively loyal follower. Mm-hmm. If under the thumb of Cadsuane, at the very least.
It works. Gets the job done.
Yeah. And she was the one, she almost stabbed Rand when he was unconscious.
Right. We're not completely sure what their motivations are, but yes, that was that uncertainty centers very much around her.
So yeah, I don't think she's a dark friend. Obviously she's not, but I think she was thinking about stabbing Rand just for political expediency.
Somewhere between survival and political expediency. Yeah, I absolutely think she was considering it. And then we get a very interesting little exchange between them. How do you know when a woman wants to kill you?
When she knows your name? Dobrain did not sound as if he were joking. Rand tilted his head thoughtfully, then nodded. And that's definitely something with Louis Theron in his head.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely some LTT commentary. There are 3 people sitting at that table talking about women. Am I right?
Three dudes, definitely. What do you think about that comment? How do you know when a woman wants to kill you when she knows your name?
I don't know. I've never understood that. That feels very women are from Mars, women are from Venus. Yeah, that... It feels very that, and I've always just glossed it over and not given it much thought.
It's the boomer humor. Oh, take my wife, please. Like that sort of, yeah. It's sort of, I feel like, again, an artifact of Jordan in the 90s where that was funny. And I'm over it. I'm just over it. I'm just like, no, that's...
But there's also an element of noble women in this plot are extremely lethal. And they were just talking about noble women.
Who did almost try and kill him and stab him.
Yeah, so there's a lot more truth in it than a stereotype. This particular class of characters, this is a very true statement for.
But again, that's where I come back to whenever someone in the Wheel of Time says, how do you know when a man and or a woman wants to do something? I say, just replace that with people. How do you know when someone wants to kill you? When they know your name. How do you know when a nobleman wants to kill you? When they know your name, right? Instead of making it about men or women, just make it about that class of people.
Yeah.
And then it's more accurate. And so often it's men assuming this about women and women assuming that about men, when reality, they both have the same traits.
Yeah, it would be funnier if it was about nobles. When do nobles want to kill you? When they know your name. Because that was exactly how it happened in Kyrian in The Great Hunt, right? Exactly. And
Little Jen saying, how can you tell if an Aes Sedai is going to use you? She's in the same room.
Accurate, though.
And Jedi Pants points out that we have a saying like that. How do you know if a politician is lying? It's when their mouth is open. Sort of all in that same vein of this is just what people of that status do.
Yeah, but it makes more sense to have it be people of a status rather than people of an inherent
gender.
Yeah, or race, for example. You do it by race, it gets... Everyone knows that's not good, but doing it by gender, and it's fine. It's funny.
Right.
But doing it by profession, it's legitimately funny because you chose your profession.
And maybe by nationality.
Depending.
That's a little more iffy,
there can be very strong nationalist jokes that are extremely accurate.
Right. How do you know when a German's being serious? Right.
Yeah, and some countries deserve more of that sort of punching up at them than others. Some national traits are more worthy of mockery than others.
Rand reiterates that Weramon is a fool who makes too many mistakes. He makes those mistakes because he's a dark friend and he's undermining you, not because he's a moron, although he's probably both. Mm-hmm.
He doesn't get that Min is deliberately throwing the wine at him, but Dobrain does. Dobrain's giving her all this side eye. Again, physical comedy threaded through this whole scene. Because he's just looking at Min like, what is your problem? Mm-hmm. Why you have a problem, but why are you having a problem? Rand just doesn't get it. It's going right over his head.
Well, he doesn't get that she's angry about the letters, right? He doesn't understand that that's something that she would be angry about, right? And she's certainly not telling him.
Right. He can't tell that she's angry. Dobrain can tell she's angry, but he doesn't know why.
Right.
And then what else? We get to talk about what else, what other news is there. And that is that Lady Caroline and High Lord Darlin are under the protection / confinement of Cadsuane at Lady Arlen's palace, which is kind of just a B plot that simmers forever.
And, we know from Min's viewings that they'll end up married. He ends up king.
Of Tyr. That's why she doesn't know what nation the crown goes to, is because it's not a nation with a king crown yet. And it will get one at the end of the last battle.
Which she tells him how to make, which I love that she's like, oh, when he's like, oh, I think I know what your crown should look like. Let me help you out with that. Which comes from the vision. There's a little bit of sort of circular logic. We're talking about like determination and time, and like the pattern showed her what the crown should look like. So that's what the crown ends up looking like.
Yeah, it's a very, very weird little loop, but it's just for a decoration. So it's fine, right?
But how many of her prophecies do that, right? How many of her prophecies are self-fulfilling? That if she hadn't said anything, they wouldn't have happened, right? Like, that's something we talk about, where if she tries to prevent it, she causes it. And if she doesn't, it happens anyway.
Right. Absolutely. Caroline and Darlin do get out of their confinement with Cadsuane because of Dobrain. I forget when exactly, but at a certain point, Dobrain says, hey, by the way, they got away. Shocked face, and everyone looks at him and goes, was that a good idea? And he goes, dunno, but it happened. And I forget exactly when that happens, but it's somewhere in the future.
Can I admit, I mix up Darlin and Dobrain quite a bit. They're both D names, they're both stewards, they both go on to sort of rule their country. They're quite difficult to tell apart occasionally. So if I mix those two up verbally, I apologize ahead of time.
I don't think I had them straight until doing the podcast, and that has forced them straight in my head. But there's not really a lot of difference between them except for Caroline. Caroline is really how you can tell them apart. Which one is with Caroline and which one is suspicious of Caroline.
And don't forget, Caroline is Moraine's cousin or sister?
Cousin. And somehow we also learn here that Min's viewings are like common knowledge, and she's been getting hassled like a county fair fortune teller. She's been just getting hassled with women who want their fortunes read because somehow her secret's totally out.
Well, we know the wise ones got it. I think she just was she was telling Rand about the visions in front of people, and I think they figured it out.
Shocked face. I'm so shocked.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if we actually saw that on screen.
Just with the wise ones, I think. But I mean, she's so important. How can people not talk about her, right? I don't know. And then she gets a little bit of, she pours herself the dregs of wine because she's being so cranky. So she gets a little bit of her own medicine thrown back at her for being so petty with the wine. Now we get to the bargain as a plot point.
Mm-hmm. And we saw the beginning of this. We saw Rand leave these two behind to finish the bargain. Right. And so now we're getting the results of that bargaining that he abandoned midway through. Because remember, he left because he was in a very tight space in the cabin, and his PTSD of being in the box kicked in and he had to get up and go.
Yep. So I want to read the entire text of the treaty just in its entirety because it's short, but I think it's an important piece of the text. Hareen din Togara Two Winds, Wave Mistress of Clan Shodine, speaking for Nesta din Ria's Two Moons, Mistress of the Ships to the Atha on Mier, and thus binding all the Atha on Mier, has promised such ships as the Dragon Reborn needs, to sail when and where he needs them, for whatever purposes he requires. In return, the Dragon Reborn will not change any laws of the Atha on Mier, as he has done among the shorebound. Secondly, you must give the Atha on Mier land, a square 1 mile on a side, at every city on navigable water that you control now or come to control. Within that area, the laws of the Atha on Mier are to hold sway above any others. This agreement must also be made by the rulers of those ports so that the agreement will survive you. Thirdly, the Dragon Reborn agrees to keep an ambassador chosen by the Atha on Mier with him at all times. Hareen din Togara has named herself. She will be accompanied by her Windfinder, her Swordmaster, and a retinue. And fourthly, the Dragon Reborn agrees to go promptly to a summons from the Mistress of the Ships, but not more than twice in any 3 consecutive years.
Rand in no way upholds the terms of his agreement.
No.
He never keeps their advisor with them. He never goes to them when summoned.
I don't think they ever do summon him.
I think there's a point in the end of the books when he's supposed to go to them. And he delays and delays and delays. Yeah, and he keeps the entourage with him, but like at the back of the trail of entourage that he has. So they're not really with him, but they're allowed to try to trail behind. It's very letter of the law, not spirit. And we don't see anything about that square mile of land. I'm kind of assuming it happens in the background, but I don't know if we ever see that implemented.
I feel like there's part of that with Elaine. I feel like at some point she goes into negotiations with the Seafolk about the Andorran plot.
Is that part of the renegotiation with the kin? Because she's made an agreement with the Seafolk about sending them trainers.
Maybe.
And they do a whole renegotiation because she's like, listen, this is a terrible bargain. You know it, I know it. Like, all you're getting is resentful people who don't want to teach you anything. Why don't we let your folk intern with us and we'll intern with you, and that'll be better than having like resentful teachers.
Yeah. So yeah, it does come up with Elaine. It's really far out there and off to the side. It's they drove a hard bargain, but then Rand just ignores them, so it doesn't really mean anything.
And in a lot of ways he does. He's got them by the balls, right? They've been trying to make this bargain. They are supposed, prophecy says they're supposed to serve him. And they do because it's the end of the freaking world, you know? And he's like, yeah, no, I have other things to do. And also, again, we're only a couple of months out from the last battle. So the whole, like, summon him not more than twice in 3 years or whatever it is, it's like, yeah, that's, like, not relevant because he's not going to be alive for much longer. As the Dragon Reborn, obviously, he's alive.
Well, I mean, he's not planning on it.
No, yeah.
At this point. The other interesting thing I think in here is the discussion around how that would affect the ports. Right? Dobrain and Min internally, silently, think that this is a terrible idea economically. And then Rand does this very, like, savvy LTT thing. And it's like, well, you don't have to give them land on the water. Just land in a country that has water. Like, you can put it wherever you want. And it's very sneaky of him.
It is. It's like, and you can build a wall around it and say anything coming in or out of that land gets taxed. So, you know, I can see where they, especially with gateways, that might work a little differently. Gateways are a major game changer when it comes to the Seafolk.
Yeah. And I do definitely feel like there's a bit of like, oh no, we can't let, you know, the exotic, scary people like contaminate our culture. Dobrain's definitely got a bit of that kind of xenophobia going on. But Rand's solution is so
devious.
Yeah, devious. It's got a bit of chaotic, everyone's losing a little bit energy to it, which I feel like is a straight LTT move. I don't think that Rand the sheep herder would have thought of that. That's LTT the politician. It's got some is it Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible that wants to chop the child in half to prove which one is the real mom? I might be getting that wrong.
I don't know. I believe you though. I know the story, I don't know the names.
But yeah, Rand is generally super offended at the idea that anyone would expect this of him.
They'd given away the barn to sell a horse.
Yeah.
The Magi's deal, right? The, like, cutting off your hair to buy... what was the Magi? Deal of the Magi. There's a short story about two people who buy each other gifts, but in order to do so, like, she cuts off her hair to buy him something, and but then he gets her a comb, right? But she's cut off her hair.
That does ring a weird bell. Oh, and chat's saying it was probably Solomon, not Nebuchadnezzar. I think, yeah, you're right. It is Solomon, because he's the wise one. But Nebuchadnezzar has such a cool name. Solomon. We just say that a whole bunch over and over again. Such a cool name.
I think that's why they named the ship in the Matrix the Nebuchadnezzar.
I forgot about that, but strong agree. So, yeah, Rand blows up at the Eyes to Die, and she goes off at him. And it is the most epic. Like, she starts out just defending herself a little bit, and then she just ends on this ringing, like you could hear a pin drop because she was just shouting. Like, she just lets it go and unloads on him, and it's beautiful.
Feel lucky she didn't want your new boots and that ghastly throne of yours as well. Oh, and by the by, she formally acknowledged you as the Coromor. May you get a bellyache from it. That's, again, one of those lines that I can imagine Kate Redding reading every single time. Like, may you get a bellyache from it. She really, like, digs into that line right there.
It's a lot of passion in that delivery. Yeah. And then Rand takes it the correct way, which is to say, yeah, I guess that Taviran thing, I'm going to hear things I don't want to hear. And he doesn't blame her or, like, lash back at her. He's like, that feels like a Taviran level of unloading. So I'm just going to take that in the spirit it was offered and Move on.
And praises her, says, I handed you a dog's dinner, but you and Rafaela have done well, right? Like, put you in a shitty situation and you got the best out of it that you could. You know, and that's the Rand that we like to see as a ruler, right? The like, I'm going to give you shitty situations and you are going to do the best you can and we're all going to move forward, right? That's the kind of leader you want, not one who rants and raves and, you know, comes down on you for doing your best.
Absolutely. What do you think of the bargain? Do you think it was a dog's dinner of nonsense, or do you think it was a good salvaging of a shitty situation?
I mean, to be honest, it's a pretty, other than the land, the square mile of land, which is kind of like, ooh, they got a lot out of it. But at the same time, like, he is getting their services of an entire nation for free for an undetermined amount of time to do whatever he says. That is huge, right? All of their profits, all of their ships, all of their travel, right? He gets to tell them what to do. That shouldn't come at no cost. Having someone with him, frankly, as a leader, he shouldn't be abandoning his people and his followers as much as he is. He should have people with him. He should have advisors. He should have, like, we don't let the president go off and, like, go on an assassination mission in an unknown city, right? Like, he has advisors with him at all times. The being summoned, again, he's got gateways. What's the big fucking deal? Like, gateway in, have your meeting, walk out again, right? It doesn't seem like that bad of a deal, especially with Rand's whole, like, yeah, give him a square mile of land in the middle of like on a swamp in the middle of nowhere, right? Like, that's not going to do him any good.
Yeah, I think it's a great bargain because it stimulates trade in the long run for all these nations and the Seafolk. They bargained to get a massive influx into new markets. That's a huge part of what they wanted. They want to have an ambassador with him when they are they're going to need to be getting orders from him and like doing shit for him. He needs an ambassador. That's fair. And yet the summoning thing is like, they're proud people. Of course, they're going to want to be able to say that they can call the Dragon Reborn to them, but also they bargained for this limitation on it so it can't be done frivolously. They can only do it twice maximum before the last battle, right? No more than twice in 3 consecutive years. They can only pull that card twice before he dies. Like, I think it's a great bargain. I think all of the offense at it is really on behalf of Rand's ego or some other character motivation of like nationalism. I think it's a brilliant bargain that's really win-win for everyone.
Right. Well, and I think that the Aes Sedai pretty much had the Shan Chan by the coat, you know, by the balls, basically, when
absolutely
they admitted that Rand was the Coromor, right, while he was still there, right? Like, huge give on their part. Like, and it's hard to come back from that. It's like giving your queen away in the beginning of a chess game, right? Like, how do you come back from that? Like,
yeah, no, it's tough.
Oh, Seafolk, not Shan Chan. Thank you.
These boat people with their S names.
One of these days, I won't make that mistake.
No, you'll always make that mistake.
I will always. Because they're the two people that come from the sea, and they're both begin with an S. Serene,
Dobrain, and Darlin.
S names. One of my favorite songs in the latest contest was the S names song that made fun of all the S names stuff.
Yeah, from PoD, from Somebody's Opinion. Yes, I loved that so much. She's an Aes Sedai. She's an Aes Sedai. She's also an Aes Sedai. Yeah. Oh, that's such a good one. Cadsuane again. She gets brought up again, and he decides, that's it. I'm tired of hearing about her. Clearly the pattern wants me to deal with her directly. Let's go talk to her. And Min's like, do we have to? And Rand's like, literally, yes. Yes, we do. But everyone bails. Everyone runs away.
I was like, I do not want to be here between the meeting of an immovable force and an unstoppable object, right? Like, yeah. No, thank you. The two of the Rand and Cadsuane, whenever they meet, bad things can happen to the people around them.
Yeah, mere mortals will be crushed.
So Min goes out to the Maidens, who were playing some sort of finger game called Knife, Paper, Stone.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors. Right? Like, and what they're doing is they are deciding who's going to walk inside and punch Rand, right? They're, I assume, playing some sort of tournament game to see who's...
Yeah, just who can win the most. Yeah, it's a quick little gamble game, round robin kind of thing. Yeah, to select, because literally like 600 women want to beat him up, and they decide, what, 6? No, 3. Mm-hmm. 3 women get the privilege. So it's a very intense, but no doubt very fast a series of elimination rounds to select the 3.
But I love that, like, that's how they make decisions among themselves, is rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors.
It always takes me back to Farscape. John Crichton does a lot of rock, paper, scissors decision making in that show. Especially there's an episode where he gets cloned and duplicated, and it's one of those things where then, like, his clone goes off and, like, you end up through the whole season you follow both of them, and in order to make decisions among themselves they try and rock, paper, scissors, but they always tie every single time.
Right, of course.
So and then there's a whole one of them ends up dying, and he, like, leaves a message for his other one and goes, all right, one final time, and they, like, I don't think they show you the outcome of the final one. So
nice.
Really, really love Farscape as a show. I don't know how many people have gone back and seen that, and it's one of those things where first season it has some corniness to it, but it's Jim Henson's puppets, which are just brilliant. It's rather than having, people in costumes or bad CGI, they made the aliens puppets. Huh. And I kind of think it's brilliant. And yes, it looks a little cheesy in the beginning because you're like, wait, are these Muppets? No, they're definitely puppets, and they do a good job with it. And I think as that show goes on, it matures a lot and actually has some really interesting plot lines and some really subtle questions it asks, and I fall in love with those characters. Like, Farscape is one of those shows that, if you can sit through the first season, really gets quite good.
I've never watched it, so
you really should. Like, I don't say that about many shows. It did get canceled, right? So the final season wraps up a lot of things kind of abruptly, but it's a comfort show for me. And it's one of those things that just really, 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 in the way that the Wheel of Time main characters are my friends, the characters from Farscape are also my friends. Like Rigel and John Crichton and Aaron Sun, and, like, the fact that I can go off and just rattle off their names like that means they're very individual people in my head. Perhaps as I've gotten older, I'm maybe a little less interested in it, but, oh, man. Okay, now I need to go back and watch that show. It's hard to get someone to watch with you, though, because, again, the first season is very corny. And so, but you can't really skip it either. So it's like, please just sit with me for these 26 episodes, and then you'll love it. It's a hard bar. It's a steep task to ask of somebody. And it's back when shows were 26, episodes a season, right? They weren't just the 8 episodes or whatever that we get now. Which, the one thing I do wish the TV show, man, the Wheel of Time TV show, I wish it had come out when we got 26 episodes in a season, right? Rather than the 8, right? Like, I want, give me more. Have a beach episode where nothing happens. That's great.
Literally.
Right? Like,
literally. Oh my God. Jordan would have approved so strongly. So Min goes out and delivers the message, observes the rock, paper, scissors, and then goes back in and is like, ooh, Rand's in bed. I'm going to get to watch him undress. And she's getting all excited and all hot and bothered, and also is trying to tell him about Cadsuane. And then Rand does this really interesting thing where he says, if you let someone know that you need them, they'll have a hold on you and a leash, and I won't do that for anybody. I need you. It's like, Rand, did you literally just say that you refuse to need anyone, and now you're saying you need her? Like, it's very sweet, but also, like, say that again slowly.
Yeah, I mean, but he's past that point with Min, right? He doesn't want anyone else to have a leash on him, but so many people already do, Min being one of them.
And she also doesn't pull for any reason other than, like, to take care of him, so I guess it's fine. But that's kind of where they're sort of flirting and talking about things. And then the Aiel maidens come marching in and very carefully beat his ass.
Somera, Nasser, and Nandera. And Nandera we've seen a bunch. I feel like she's one of the more common Aiel that come up. But the other two I don't know as well.
Nandera is Sulin's second. She's the one her and Sulin are sort of in their power struggle about who's leader of Fardar Ismai on the side of the Dragon Wall. Samara is one of the ones who makes horrible soup. It's like Samara and Lamel and someone else that make this awful soup that he hates.
And Samara's killed in the explosion.
and he regrets thinking badly about her soup, and there's all of that. And then Nasser, we don't ever see again, but she is Shido. We do learn that in this chapter. She says, I left my clan for you. You will not spit on me. And then Rand thinks, oh, well, she's a Shido, so I'd better keep an eye on her. And it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah, but this is her only appearance in the series.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And they come in not wearing their shufas, so they're not going to kill him or anything. They don't have any weapons. Like, it's clearly a interpersonal situation.
The Shido Maidens are a very interesting group of people.
Yes. The inverse of the brotherless, basically.
We don't explore them, but they stay with their society over their clan.
And I do wish we could see more of them, because Melindra is a dark friend, so she's not really a true example. And then Nasser, we only see this one time. We get more perspective from Roland and the Brotherless about what it's like to abandon your clan for your beliefs around the dragon. But yeah, there are a whole subset of Shido Maidens that are the reverse of the Brotherless, basically. They abandoned their clan for the dragon.
But again, with the same thing, right? They stayed, just like the Brotherless, they abandoned their clan for their society. And that's how they justify staying with the other group.
Yeah, and it's something that every Aiel has to wrestle with, because to go against clan and society are both impossible. You're not supposed to be able to do either. And a lot of them, because of how they feel about the dragon, end up having to do one or the other. Also because Savannah. Ugh.
And Nandera gives us the reasoning. You carry the honor of the Fardizmai, son of a maiden, she said grimly. You promised to call us to dance the spears for you, and then you ran to battle and left us behind. You will not do this again. And, that was the battle for Ilion. That was the fight when he got his side cut. And with Torm Riotin, that was everything with the Shan-Chan. He's basically fought 2 wars in a battle without the maidens by his side. Yeah. And he promised to never do that. And he broke his promise.
Repeatedly. It's real rude.
Yeah. And it's something we see with Egwene, when she's an apprentice, when she breaks her promises, she gets punished for that.
Yeah. And it's, I understand where they're coming from. And you see how much they do care about him, because they avoid beating his side. They only beat Min up to the extent that they need to keep her from stabbing them. Right? They don't mean to punish her for him. They're not taking it out on her, but also she's pulling out knives and they can't allow her to stab them. So they disable her with physical violence, but it's like, that's what they're there to do. Okay.
And I'd say for the most part, Rand keeps them by his side, but he doesn't. Like, he goes off to farm matting without any maidens.
But he does that because he's not going as the Dragon Reborn. Right, he goes on the lamb, and so he's able to justify it that he needs to be on the down low. But like what he just did, these 2 campaigns, not so much the going to the Toram Riotin, but the battles, or the actual wars. He was going as the Dragon Reborn with lots of soldiers. Like, how dare he leave them out?
Right. I would say, though, that like part of carrying his honor is being there to protect him, being his bodyguards. And I understand why they wouldn't necessarily be inconspicuous in farmatting, but at the same time, like, they would have been hugely useful, because that's where the physical battle skills of the Aiel would have absolutely come in handy, right? That's why Lan is so effective in farmatting. That's one of the reasons I love the farmatting line, is because we get like Lan gets to be badass, where he goes up against like other channelers on equal footing. And it's like just the sword skills matter in farmatting way more than how powerful you are.
It would have been a really good place to have Aiel. I agree. I just think that it doesn't count as breaking his promise, because he can say, well, I have to go inconspicuously. So he can skate through the... I don't think it's smart. I just think that's why they don't beat him up again. Because they believe his reasoning. But it was still dumb, and he almost gets himself and Lan killed. So,
Right. So he lies down on the bed in pain, and Min's like, well, not what I wanted to do in this bed. He's like, nope, too much.
Yeah, they both have the same thought. Like, well, we were about to get rowdy, but now we would just like to get not beaten up. It's fine. And then Daigian Moselane comes in. And brings the sassiest possible response from Cadsuane, which is that she doesn't have time to see Rand because she's too engaged in her needlepoint.
Which is, I mean, just the most obvious, like, no, I have to go wash my hair, like, excuse. Like, I can't go on a date with you because I'm too busy washing my hair or working on my needlepoint. It's like, wait, what? No. You can always do that later. That's not, and it doesn't take very long.
Yeah, it's a very clear, fuck you, you can't tell me what to do kind of thing.
I noticed that she's also kind of wearing a Kaisiara, the moonstone, instead of a blue stone. But it's a very similar sort of jewelry to what Moraine wears.
Yeah, she's also a Kyrian and noble. She's also a tiny, precise, bejeweled Kyrian and noble woman, Aes Sedai.
With opinions.
Very strong opinions, yes. And Rand is very mad and yells after Daikyon that he won't do it and is throwing a temper tantrum, and Min tells him, you need to figure it out. And Rand says, I don't know, do I? And that's where we sort of cut the perspective and switch into Rand's head. Same scene, but moving from Min to Rand.
And I will say, Daikyon is killed by Shadar Haran when he rescues Semirog.
She goes through a lot. She shows up a lot. She goes through a lot of things, and Shadar Haran is how she dies.
Killed directly by the Dark One. I gotta say, if there's a way to go, it's like, yeah, you know, it took the Dark One to take me out.
You were that much of a pain in the ass, he had to kill you personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rand sort of sits up. You can tell Cadsuane she can go to the pit of doom. Tell her he can rot. And it's like that yelling after her as she walks away, like, and you can go to hell too. Like, there's a very, like, sullen boy aspect to that.
Very childish.
Yeah, very childish. Rand prepared carefully, dressing in the green coat again, sending Min with messages for the Maidens to carry. So this is where we get the perspective change. Rand prepared carefully, dressing in the green coat again, sending Min with messages for the Maidens to carry. At least they would still do that. His ribs ached almost as much on his right side as the wounds did on the left, and his belly felt as if he had been beaten with a board. He had promised them. He seized a hold of Saidin alone in his bedchamber, unwilling to let Min see him falter again. He could keep her safe at least, somehow, but how could she feel safe if she saw him about to fall over? He had to be strong for her sake. He had to be strong for the world. That bundle of emotions in the back of his head that was Alana reminded him of the cost of carelessness. Right then, Alana was sulking. She must have pushed a wise one too far, because if she was sitting gingerly. I'm willing to bet that's more Cadsuane than a wise one.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably right.
I'm trying to remember what's going on with the two of them right now, but she's basically under Cadsuane's control.
But she also does get beaten by wise ones.
Does she?
I think so. Remember when Rand starts to feel shock and indignation through the bond?
Okay. That's one of those things that, like, I would actually like to go back and do a real deep dive into what the hell is going on with Alana, right? Because so often we feel her emotions, but we never see exactly what's going on with her.
Yeah, she's super off screen. Well, we need Morgan for that. That's a Morgan-style deep dive.
That is a Morgan thing.
Lillian, Cadsuane knows about the bonding. Has known about the bonding for a bit, I believe.
Give me just a second to look up some stuff. The Path of Daggers, Chapter 12, Cadsuane quizzes Alana about Rand, but she's told Cadsuane all she can and is not interested in cooperating anymore. So that's Chapter 12.
Yeah, at this point, a few weeks have gone by.
Yeah.
So maybe it is wise ones then.
Oh, but in that same chapter, Cerelia was concerned about punishing Alana for fear of harming Rand, but Cadsuane assures her that it won't happen, that Rand won't be affected.
Right, and that's when he feels indignation and shock in the bond, so...
Right. And then going forward, it's also chapter 27. Yeah, so she's being punished by the wise ones at Cadsuane's permission, because Cadsuane said, oh yeah, no, you're fine. You're not going to hurt Rand. You can punish her all you want.
Yeah.
And so now she's getting... That's right. Okay, so she is getting punished by the wise ones.
So Min insists on going with him at first to see Cadsuane, and then he says no, and she just immediately turns around and is like, fine, I'll read my book instead, and ignores him. And I don't quite understand what's going on with her there. Do you have any idea why she's about facing so quickly?
I think it's a little bit of, well, you ignored me with those letters. I'm going to ignore you. Fine.
I mean, it's not like she thinks that she needs to protect Rand from Cadsuane per se. It's not that kind of danger. So, yeah, I could see that.
She also said, like, I do not want to deal with Cadsuane. Like, she does not want to run into Cadsuane. That's her whole inner monologue in the first part of the chapter is, like, she wants to avoid Cadsuane at all possible lengths. And so being like, oh, you can stay here. She's like, fine. Yeah, okay, I won't go see Cadsuane. Darn. Shoot.
Right. Yeah, because she says, you need to take me. But yeah, you're right. She was totally thinking, like, I'll do pretty much anything to not go. So, yeah, okay, I think you're right. Those two things. She has two reasons to do the same thing, which is stay and read a book, which is a mood.
I can always come up with another excuse to stay and read a book and not go out. I have a lot of sympathy for that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So Rand collects up all of the Ashaman.
And these were the Ashaman who were with him in the attack on Shanshan.
Yep. He's got Narishma, who's the only one without a dragon. And he thinks again about how he definitely told Narishma all the traps, and Narishma's the one going crazy, not him. Should have reiterate that.
I've come around to the theory that a Forsaken put additional traps on the sword around his traps, just in case he came back for it. That, like, yes, they can't pick it up, but they can go back and trap it more, so that when he goes for it, it might catch him.
Yeah, I agree that is the most logical explanation, because then they both are suspicious of each other and mistrusting of themselves because they're not taking into account a complete third factor.
Because I was trying to make it like Rand was using Callandor, and so the amplification of the taint made him forget some of the traps, or he put more on there, or, you know, the fact that he's going insane. But, like, he really is convinced that he told Narishma all of the traps, right? And I don't really see him doubting himself there. I'm pretty sure he's right about that. So I think he told Narishma about all the traps that he set.
Yeah. I'm strong nodding. And then Luz Theron gives us a fun line of "Mad men never trust."
Right. But the reason he trusts Narishma to guard Min is because Narishma got the sword and brought it back to him. Right? Narishma is the one guy he really does trust over almost anybody else. And he trusts Narishma to guard Min, his most important asset.
Does he trust Narishma to guard Min?
He ordered Narishma to stand guard on his apartments. The man saluted sharply.
Wow, I just missed that. Cool. Dope. So yeah, I agree with that. So he gives them instructions as they walk down the hallway, which we don't see until we flip the page, and then he almost immediately decides to back up on that plan anyway, because it's basically just loom and be scary, and Cadsuane is like the least loomable person.
Right. Like, that's just not going to work with Cadsuane. It would have worked on anybody else, but yeah. Again, we talk about her paralysis net, right? She has very little to be afraid of from the Ashaman, because she has Matt's Terangrial, she's got a well, she's got all these Terangrial that basically make her invulnerable to men channeling. Yeah.
She's impervious and has been around the block for a minute. So, like, she's just unflappable.
He walks by some nobles, including Alil and Anaella, and Anaella simpers, but then, like, gives him sort of a nasty look as soon as he's by. Again, that's the whole Dark Friend thing where she kisses his ass to his face and shoots daggers in his back.
The maidens escort him to Cadsuane's rooms and then turn heel and walk away. They are giving him the silent treatment and as much shunning as his need for safety will allow. He asks to himself, is her departure another sign of displeasure? Yes, Rand, yes it is.
Again, very straightforward chapter. There's not a lot of subtlety in these people's actions.
Nope.
The one weave, when they are looming, Dashiva creates a weave that Rand didn't recognize. The air seemed to hum with menace, a sense of something inexorable approaching, drawing even nearer. That's very much a Forsaken weave, right? Like, this whole, like, sense of impending doom. They use that to loom over their followers.
Yeah. Doesn't the blue have a similar weave that Moraine uses in New Spring that inclines people towards being, like, more afraid of you than they would be? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm not up on my New Spring. I'll take your word for that.
Yeah, I think it's not unrelated, but I do think it is meant to be an indication of Forsaken.
Yes,
here,
right.
For sure. I just think that the blue happened to have discovered / retained something similar.
It's just another one of those, oh my gosh, Deshiva pulling out a weave that Rand's never heard of, again, right? Coming up with knowledge that nobody else has, again. Using blue lightning that nobody else uses, again. It's like, yes, there's something different about him. He's a Forsaken.
I have no idea what they're pointing at. None.
Cadsuane makes fun of them, is like, I hope one of you is going to juggle or eat fire, basically calling them, they're menacing, looming, like entertainment.
I've seen better without paying. Oh, it's such a sick burn. And Flynn laughs. Like, Rand is so confused, and his feathers are ruffled by the fact that Flynn thinks Cadsuane is hilarious. But, like, we're all right there with Flynn. Cadsuane is being hilarious.
Right.
And he's old enough to be like, no, that is funny. You're acting like this little bantam rooster. And she is an old sheepdog and is just not impressed.
Not impressed in the slightest.
And then, yeah, Rand immediately decides that this isn't working and sends all the Ashaman out. It's a hilarious how quickly he gathers them all up and then, nope, go away. Never mind.
And Deshiva wants to be there. He doesn't want to be kicked out.
No, he wants to make sure to keep wedges between Rand and anyone who might effectively advisorify him. Advisorify.
I like that.
I'm coining words right and left over here. So Rand then does his telekinetic ooh la la, I'm so fancy showman routine where he picks up a chair and moves it and pours out the wine, boils it, decides it's too hot, opens the windows, throws it out into the snow, brings it back in, and Cadsuane counters with not giving a shit that there's snow swirling around her now and all that.
Didn't he do something similar with Elaine? Like, only like less. I'm thinking of when he melted the statues and created that weave. Yeah,
he makes the table dance, the cloth melt and weave together, and like something else. Yeah, it's a complete explosion of different telekinetic things happening. Right. But I feel like at that point he was not under control. Whereas here it is completely under control, but he's acting like it's not under control. He's like, look how crazy I am. I'm doing all these crazy things. Aren't I crazy? And she's like, yeah, you're acting crazy. Yes, I can see that. Yeah. Let her see how calm she could stay with a madman staring at her. Right. He's like really leaning into that. Like, I'm mad. And she's like, though the laurel crown is pretty cool looking, isn't it? Just sipping the tea like it's totally fine, Yeah. I prefer that name, but you can't expect me to be impressed by crowns. I've paddled the bottom of 2 reigning kings and 3 queens. Not sitting rulers, you understand, once I was done with them. Not for a day or so. She's actually not drinking tea. But yeah, she's just chill. She's totally chill. He's doing all this stuff, and she's just like, I've dealt with people scarier than you. Which, I mean, at this point, he is a very scary person, and pretty much everybody else is actually legitimately terrified of him. And she's not. And that's, I think, again, people don't like Cadsuane. And I think some of that's just she's not intimidated by him, and she treats him like the petulant person that he is and doesn't let him get away. And that's super important, to not let someone in power get away with whatever they want, as we're seeing with Putin. Yeah. Real world analogy, but he's being this petulant child who wants Ukraine, and he's surrounded by yes men who are just letting him get away with all of these crazy ass military actions, and he needs someone to stand up to him and be like, listen, I'm just not impressed. Like, you're just not that powerful. I don't care if you're poisoning and shooting all your political opponents, right? Like, I'm just not impressed, and you need to sit down and listen. Yeah, the court jester is also one of the ways we've tried to like systematically codify that role. Like, rulers need to be called on their shit, whether it's politically, interpersonally. There's so many ways, but you have to have some way of checking people's power and sense of themselves when they have undue amounts of power. Very few people are humble enough to do that themselves. Most people need help. And that's fine. It's fine. You just need to accept it. And when you're that powerful, it's very easy to be surrounded by yes men who want a piece of that power and will tell you what you want to hear just to be close to you. Especially if you're prone to killing them if they don't. Right.
Right.
Which Rand isn't generally, but like as a rule of thumb, like people think of it as a survival tactic to kiss ass.
Yeah, I mean, and if you have a group of people and some of them kiss your ass and some of them don't, and you kill the ones that don't, you're left. The only people that are left are the ones who kiss your ass, right? Like, you know, and Rand has his fair share of people who don't kiss his ass. He's got Ruark, he's got Bashir, he's got Dobrain, he's got like, he has people in different countries who don't take his shit.
But they're still impressed by him.
Yes.
They still will follow him, whereas he has to cajole Cadsuane into really following him in any way, shape, or form.
And she has some freedom in the palace because the Aiel see her as saving Rand's life, so they have tow towards her for saving his life when he got stabbed.
Which is earned. It's legitimate.
Right. She did actually save his life. I mean, other people were there, but, you know, Cadsuane was the one who made that happen.
And then Rand goes... Basically, I have lots of crowns. You should be honored to get to advise me because everyone wants to be the advisor to the Dragon Reborn, and I'm going to give it to you. And she goes, No,
I don't need to be an advisor. Advisors have to, like, have to give advice and then let you do whatever you want. And that's not where I am. Right? I'm not going to give you advice and stand back and let you do what you want. I will stand in your way. And he says, okay, well, I want your advice, but you don't have to promise to do what I say, right? I want you to be an actual, like, a consultant more than an advisor. Yeah,
and she gets a good dig in at him in this when she says, won't someone else do? Alana, perhaps? She's just so like, I see, like, I know that you know. I just want you to know that I know that you know that I know. Because she only recently discovered about the bond. Rand doesn't know how many people know about it. And she just insinuated it, but didn't say it straight out that she knows.
But she knows.
Oh, she absolutely knows. Like, yeah. But he had no idea that she might know. And now he's wondering. It's another way of pushing him off balance.
And then she says, I will make you a few promises. But man, she talks a lot without saying a lot. In this paragraph.
It's hardcore Aes Sedai speak.
I will make you some promises. I expect you to listen. It's not a promise, right? The promise is make me waste my breath and you'll yelp for it, right? Like, I promise you.
The promise is I won't make you do what I want. I expect you to listen, but I won't make you do what I want. And I don't expect you to tell me the deepest yearnings of your heart, and whatever I do will be for your own good. It's political talking point, feel good slogans. It's not substantive, qualitative. It's not what he asked for. It's licensed to do whatever the hell she wants.
I do like I will do it for your own good, not mine, not for the White Tower. Right? That is super important because that's something the other Aes Sedai who are not bound to him.
Yes.
They do what's good for them and what's good for the White Tower, not necessarily what's good for Rand. And that's super important that her advice is what's good for him.
Yeah. Well, what's good for her ideas about how he should be, which... yeah,
there is that loophole there, but still, she has legitimate concerns about him.
Yes.
Being too hard.
Yeah, I like that she's very happy to throw the White Tower aside, like in the opening arguments, the opening horse trading. She's like, oh yeah, no, fuck the Tower. Tower, whatever, I don't care. I'm doing this for you. Whereas Moraine would be like, I have to preserve the Tower and the dragon, and I guess I'll sacrifice the Tower if I have to. Cadsuane's just like, fuck the Tower. I don't even like it anyway.
Yeah.
And then he says, do they teach you how to do that? Make a promise sound a threat, which, yes, that is absolutely like Aes Sedai 201. Like, there's a whole, like, semester on how to do that at White Tower College.
Yeah, but I'm not sure Cadsuane didn't found that class, right? Like, I think she's the one who taught it to the rest of them. For sure. And then she takes that comment as an invitation to be really annoying and says, oh, you want rules. Most boys want rules. And it's just super infantilizing. And it's basically just you have to be polite and apologize. And it's this weird, like, school mistress, like, strict tutor that will, like, rap your knuckles with a ruler if you don't say your Latin right. Like, there's just this really musty, old authoritarian thing with her that just feels really unnecessary. Old school nun.
Yeah.
But, you'll be properly civil to me, my friends, and my guests. That includes not channeling at them, right? And there's a certain amount of, stop being this intimidating. Stop trying to lean on your channeling and insanity to intimidate me and my friends, right? It's not working. You're being rude. Stop it.
Which is what makes Tam's takedown of her later so delicious.
Yeah.
Because it's game recognizes game. The reason you're so hard on Rand for this is because that's how you do it. You're jealous of him being effective at it, okay?
Mm-hmm. And then I feel like what is one of the most important bits of information that we get, that oh my god, this could have been useful 6 books ago, right? I do hope you haven't tried to use Callandor, she said complacently behind him. I've heard it's vanished from the stone. You managed to escape once, but you might not twice. And he's like, wait, what?
That's such a bombshell.
Yeah, that's such a bombshell. What do you mean about Callandor? It is flawed, she replied curtly, lacking the buffer that makes other sangreal safe to use, and it apparently magnifies the taint, inducing wildness of the mind. So long as a man is using it anyway. The only safe way for you to use the sword that is not a sword. The only way to use it without the risk of killing yourself or trying to do the light alone knows what insanity is linked with 2 women and one of them guiding the flows.
Such a critical paragraph.
And that is everything to do. Now, she doesn't know about the flaw that lets you be controlled, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that she doesn't bring up, and that's something that he does figure out later. But it does explain the insanity in the stone when he uses it, and it explains the insanity of... Now, I'm still not entirely convinced the lightning thing didn't go out of his control because of insanity and wasn't just the Bowl of the Winds thing, or some combination thereof. I think the weave got out of his control, and that might have been because of the Bowl of the Winds, as much as it was him not knowing what he was doing.
It could have been that the Bowl of the Winds made the problem accelerate a lot faster than it would have taken him a few more steps to get into trouble without the Bowl of the Winds warping him off balance. Yeah,
and Margot is saying it gives us an out to be like, oh, maybe he's not as insane. Maybe it's just the sword that caused the problems. Maybe it's not as insanity, right? It's those overlapping factors of insanity. Stress, the taint, the sword, the weirdness with the one power, all of those things are over the crossing of the streams. We have all this overlapping effects, and you're never entirely sure what result is due to what effect.
Yeah.
Because there's so many all at once.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But it makes Rand feel worse because it makes him think, oh, yeah, I extra killed badly. The second that I asked Narishma to get me Callandor, I was dooming some of my own to death at my own hands.
I also like Cadsuane's explanation as to why she went into retirement. He's like, well, you were a baby and there's nothing I could do about it till you grew up. So I figured I'd wait till you were grown up before I wait 20 years and come back out of retirement. It's sort of a bit of a weird explanation. Also, why didn't she then come out of retirement earlier to be, I don't know.
She wanted other Aes Sedai to do the legwork of finding him and getting into trouble. She wanted to show up and take all the glory once a couple of the primary people had died already in the line of duty.
It is interesting, though, that I went rummaging some years ago when I first had the suspicion you might be suckling at your mother's breast. What? Where did she get the idea? She didn't hear the prophecy. When did Cadsuane learn that the dragon was reborn? And how?
Oh, man. I mean, there was a lot of mysterious deaths. There was the bounty that went out for all the babies born. There are pieces of the prophecies that do suggest Dragon Mount and a giant battle as being part of the dragon coming back. There was the pogrom, the vileness. Maybe she uncovered something dark friendy that suggested they were looking for the dragon reborn somehow. I think I just repeated myself 3 times. I don't know.
I mean, she officially retires in 950, and then she comes out of retirement for a brief period at the beginning of the Aiel War. So she pops up just long enough to learn that Rand was reborn, and then goes back into retirement.
Yeah, it's so hard to say with her what she was doing or what she was learning.
I mean, she is in New Spring. There is some with Cadsuane in New Spring.
Oh, yeah, maybe from seeing Swan and Moraine, somehow she puts all of that together and suspects that that's what they were doing.
Cadsuane somehow learns of the rebirth of the dragon and that Moraine and Suan are searching for him. She arranges for her eyes and ears to watch them.
Yeah, somehow. Something New Spring.
Somehow. So maybe we should go back in New Spring and figure that out. But it does seem like she just sort of intuits it.
Yeah. Well, she's got a lot of different ways of absorbing information and putting things together in the world. You know, enough things point in the same direction. She's going to start acting on it. Yeah. When are we going to do New Spring anyway? We still have to decide when we're doing it.
I mean, at this point, published order.
Yeah.
Because we sort of missed our opportunity at the end of Fires of Heaven. And because Cadsuane is in it, I feel like that's actually kind of relevant to do.
So that's after Crossroads?
I'm pretty sure it's after Crossroads, before Knife of Dreams. I still think we should do a 24-hour stream and just knock the whole book out in one day.
We need to plan that.
Really? What? No. Why?
Yeah, Cadsuane basically tells him to apologize before she'll consider it again. Just consider being his advisor. But he doesn't really hear her because he's looking ahead to the cleansing.
Yeah. He had hoped to use Callandor again, hoped it would be strong enough. Now only one chance remained and it terrified him. He seemed to hear another woman's voice, a dead woman's voice. You could challenge the creator.
Dun, dun, dun.
Land fear.
Yep, he is now looking at using the Chodan Call, and that means risking understanding whatever it was Lanfear was so excited about there.
But, at the same time, why couldn't he get, 2 women to join him and use Callandor?
Because he's paranoid.
Yeah, but, I mean, they end up using Callandor during the cleansing, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't. He gets to pass that off to someone a little saner.
I'm pretty sure Cadsuane is the one who's directing the flows of Callandor.
That sounds right, but I forget. But that does sound right.
Nope. Elsa and Jahar link. Jahar takes Callandor.
Oh, so it's just one man, one woman.
Sorry. Mizir. M-E-R. Mizir? She's an Aes Sedai of the Green Aja.
One-shot wonder.
She bonds Narishma as her warder.
Oh.
He's the one who, he's very pretty, right? With the long braids and the bells in his hair.
I found some really cool fan art of him for our Instagram a while back.
Oh, Jahar is Narishma. Duh. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's another... Okay. So, Maurice, Elza, and Jahar, a.k.a. Narishma.
Oh, Maurice. Right.
Maurice, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's cool. So he's the one that pulls out Callandor, and then he gets to use it for the cleansing. That's nice.
He will follow after. I guess that's what the prophecy means.
He will blast things to smithereens after.
There are a lot of POVs in that chapter. Just with Winterheart with the Chodan Call.
Oh, yeah.
Rand, Elsa, Barmelin, Tamina, Sindane, Cadsuane, Rand, Demondred, Sindane, Osengar, Varen, Eben Hopwell, Sindane again, Moghedian, Rand again, Cadsuane again, Osengar again, Elsa again, Moghedian again, Cadsuane again, and then overview POV.
Wow. Yeah. Nice.
It's going to be a hell of a chapter, the cleansing.
Whew, yeah.
Might have to be a 2-parter.
Probably. Yeah, after we put it off for 8 months, then it will have to be a 2-parter.
Well, was there anything else about that chapter you had? Just all the stuff around the Callandor and him learning that it is flawed is sort of for me, that's the big point of this chapter.
Agreed.
Is that bombshell drop.
It's setting us up for the Seafolk are going to be closer in on Rand, and Callandor is going to be a bigger danger. Along with a nice vignette of Min, even though she's having some annoying thoughts about boys, she's also being smart as hell. Yeah, it's a fun, direct chapter that helps us sort of tie up this book, and we are just a few chapters from the end now.
We are. Yeah, I mean, we've already had the really important stuff in this book. This does feel like an extended epilogue, right? Again, because he has these massive epilogues occasionally, and I feel like some of the information in these various chapters could be one big epilogue after the battle with the Seafolk.
Totally. And it's interesting, it's direct, it's fun, but it's not nearly as mysterious as some of the more intriguey chapters that we've had in this book. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for this fun recording. This was great. Everyone, please remember to rate and review us in the world. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
We're on time for once.
I know.
What a concept.
I think everyone's going to be like, wait, what the fuck? We missed the first, 20 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Fortunately, I don't think that they'll be disappointed to show up 20 minutes in, because we'll still probably only be on the first page. There's a lot of events in this chapter to talk about. It is straightforward in the sense that things happen, but also, these are things that are happening.
I'm yes and no. Again, it's just sort of Rand and Min and some people hanging out. Well, I guess he gets his ass beat. There is that. Yeah,
we have the bargain with the Seafolk. We have the Maidens beating his ass. We have his first overture to Cadsuane on the advisorship. It's a lot of remarkably straightforward conversations compared to how Deus de Mar some of these chapters can be.
Right. This is these are characters we know. We don't have to come up with a lot of wait, which noble is this belong to? We're pretty much familiar with the characters. The conversations either about events that have already happened or major events. So we don't have to be oh, remember that time when this random thing happened? And it's I understand the motivations of all these characters. I didn't have to do a lot of research to figure out why the characters are doing what they're doing. Now, some of that might be because we've been doing this podcast and we've talked about these events so much that the whole Maidens beating his ass thing was actually a little weird to me the first time I read it. But realizing that the last time he hung out with them was before he left to get the crown of Ilion.
He ran off not knowing if he was healed from the dagger, and then scooped up a couple of crowns, got into a war and a half.
Yeah. He's had a whole series of plot lines without the Maidens.
And that's this book, basically. A lot of this book is that period of time. And again, we're at the end of the book, so we're really wrapping up a lot of what's happened. So it's a little more exposition epilogue-y.
And some of last book, because he got the crown of Ilion at the end of last book.
Yeah, because we have some overlap on the timeline there. But yeah, there's less to talk about because we have been building up to these conversations and these moments for the whole book, or maybe even more than the book. There's a lot that gets concluded, but there's a lot to talk about here in chapter 27, The Bargain.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?